Dust hung heavy in the late afternoon sun as the small town of Red Rock settled into the slow rhythm of another day. The saloon doors creaked open with a familiar groan, letting in the dry wind that carried the scent of leather, horses, and dust. A tall man, with a hat pulled low over his eyes, strode across the street. His boots kicked up little puffs of dirt, and the spurs on his heels jingled with each step. Everyone in Red Rock knew him as Colt McGraw, a man whose reputation preceded him wherever he went. Some called him a gunslinger, others a man of his word. But no one knew the story behind the hard line of his jaw or the glint of something softer hiding beneath his rugged exterior. Colt's boots came to a stop outside a modest, weather-worn house on the edge of town. The place belonged to an old man named Jeremiah, who had raised his daughter, Anna, all alone since her mother had passed. Colt had been passing through Red Rock weeks ago when he'd helped the man fend off a gang trying to take his land. He didn't do it for fame or money. He did it because Jeremiah had once saved his life when Colt was a boy. That debt had been on Colt's mind ever since. And now, as the sun sank lower, he was finally keeping his promise. Anna was inside, sweeping the floor, unaware that Colt had come. The door creaked, and she looked up to see the tall figure framed in the doorway. Her eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and wariness. "Colt McGraw," she said softly, setting the broom aside. "I didn't expect to see you again." "I'm here for a favor," Colt said, tipping his hat. His voice was low but steady. "Jeremiah said you needed some help with the farm before winter comes. I aim to do what I can." Anna blinked. "You're really here?" Her voice held a hint of disbelief. Many people in Red Rock knew Colt by reputation, but very few had ever seen him act with such quiet generosity. "I promised your pa," Colt said simply, his gaze dropping to the worn floorboards. "He saved me once. Now it's my turn." And so, the days that followed were a rhythm of shared labor. Colt and Anna worked side by side from dawn until dusk, repairing fences, feeding the livestock, and fixing the roof that had begun to leak during the last storm. He moved with a quiet efficiency, handling every task with a mix of strength and care that made Anna's heart stir in ways she couldn't quite understand. Colt was a man of few words, but when he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made people listen. Anna found herself opening up to him during the long afternoons. She told him stories of her childhood, of her dreams for the farm, and of her mother, whose gentle hands had once tended to every corner of the house. Colt listened without interruption, and when he finally spoke, it was always with thoughtfulness, never with judgment. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat on the porch watching the sun sink behind the distant mesas. The sky blazed with reds and golds, and for a moment, the world seemed suspended in peace. "You know," Anna said quietly, "I never thought I'd see anyone like you in Red Rock. Someone different, kind." Colt's eyes met hers, and for the first time, a shadow of vulnerability crossed his rugged features. "I've done things I'm not proud of," he admitted. "But your pa, he reminded me that some debts aren't paid with money or violence. They're paid with something harder, honor and doing what's right." Anna's hand brushed against his, almost accidentally, and Colt felt a jolt that had nothing to do with the cool evening breeze. For the first time in years, he felt something that wasn't just survival or obligation. Something warmer, gentler, and infinitely more dangerous to a man like him. Weeks turned into months. The farm began to thrive under their combined efforts. Spring brought green shoots to the fields and new life to the livestock. Colt stayed longer than he had intended, each day finding more reason to linger. And with each passing day, Anna's presence became a quiet anchor for a man who had spent most of his life drifting from one town to the next, never staying long enough to let anyone close. It wasn't all peaceful. Trouble had a way of finding Colt, no matter where he went. One afternoon, as he was repairing the barn roof, a cloud of dust signaled trouble on the horizon. A band of outlaws, men Colt had tangled with before, rode into Red Rock, demanding the town hand over every last ounce of gold and goods. The sheriff, a wiry man with a nervous twitch, looked to Colt, knowing the man's reputation as the only one who could face the threat. "I don't want trouble," Colt called out to the outlaws. His hand hovered over the gun at his hip, ready, but not eager. "Leave now and no one gets hurt." The leader sneered. "And if we don't?" Colt's response was swift, precise, and brutal. In a matter of minutes, the outlaws were either fleeing or lying in the dirt, groaning. Colt never celebrated the victory. He simply wiped the sweat from his brow and turned back to Anna, who had watched the scene from the porch with wide eyes. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, rushing to his side. "I did," he replied simply. "Some debts are heavier than others." That night, as they sat by the fire, Anna leaned her head on Colt's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. "You know," she said softly, "I think the farm brought you here, but I think you stayed because of me." Colt's eyes glimmered with something he rarely allowed anyone to see. Hope. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I just realized that some things, some people, are worth staying for." As the seasons changed, so did their bond. Laughter echoed across the fields, shared meals became cherished rituals, and every evening on the porch was a reminder of the life they were building together. Colt taught Anna how to ride, and she taught him that love could be quiet, steady, and unshakable. But the Wild West was never a place to forget the past. One evening, a messenger arrived from a neighboring town, bearing news that Colt's old gang was regrouping. They sought revenge, aiming to claim the infamy that Colt had long abandoned. For the first time, the man who had once wandered freely felt a tug of fear, not for himself, but for the woman who had changed his life. "I don't want to leave you," Anna said, gripping his hands tightly. "But I know you have to face this." Colt knelt beside her, looking into her eyes with a seriousness that made her heart ache. "I'll be back," he promised. "No matter what, I'll come back to you. That's a debt I can't walk away from." The next morning, Colt rode out with the rising sun, the wind carrying the scent of the open plains and the weight of duty. The confrontation was fierce, the kind that left scars both visible and invisible. Colt fought not just with skill, but with the knowledge that he was fighting for something bigger than himself. A future, a love, a home. When the dust settled, Colt emerged battered but victorious, having ended the threat for good this time. Returning to Red Rock, he found Anna waiting, her eyes shining with relief and something more, love, unwavering and patient. Without a word, Colt dismounted and pulled her into his arms. The world outside the farm could wait. This was the place where he belonged. Seasons passed, and the farm flourished as their life together deepened. Colt, the man who had wandered alone across the harsh landscapes of the West, had found something far rarer than gold or fame. He had found love, trust, and a home in Anna's heart. And every time he looked across the fields they had nurtured together, he remembered the simple promise that had brought him here. "You paid for me. Now do it." It had been more than a debt repaid. It had been a life changed, a heart healed, and a future secured. Colt McGraw, the cowboy of Red Rock, had finally learned that some rewards couldn't be measured in coins or cattle. They were measured in laughter, in shared sunsets, and in the quiet, steady pulse of love that no storm could ever take away. And as he stood with Anna on the porch one last evening, watching the sun melt into the horizon, Colt realized that the greatest adventure of all wasn't in the wild expanses of the West. It was in the everyday moments, in the bonds forged through trust and care, and in the love that had waited patiently for him all along.